I sold my childhood home for $18 million. After months of negotiations with developers who wanted to turn my family's Victorian estate into luxury condominiums, I finally signed the papers that morning. My hands were still shaking from the enormity of it all when I got into my car. $18 million. I couldn't wait to tell Lawrence. We'd been married for 38 years, and for 38 years, I'd watched every penny. Lawrence handled all our finances. He said it was easier that way, more efficient. My weekly allowance was $300 for groceries, household items, and anything I might need for myself. When I'd asked last year if we could hire someone to help with the heavy cleaning now that my knees weren't what they used to be, he'd looked at me like I'd suggested we buy a yacht. "Margaret, a cleaning service costs $200 a visit. That's wasteful. You have plenty of time." I did have time. I'd retired from my part-time library job 5 years ago. At his suggestion, "We don't need the money," he'd said, "and I'd like to come home to a wife who isn't exhausted, so I'd quit," even though I loved that job. I loved recommending books to patrons, loved the quiet rustle of pages, loved feeling useful. But now, everything would change. $18 million meant freedom. It meant I could finally renovate the kitchen with its 40-year-old appliances. It meant I could visit Melissa in Seattle without waiting for Lawrence to approve the expense. It meant maybe, just maybe, we could finally take that trip to Ireland I'd been dreaming about since our honeymoon. I drove faster than usual, my excitement building with every mile. Lawrence would be working from home today, as he did most Thursdays. He'd be in his study, probably on another conference call with Tokyo or London. He was always on calls with Tokyo or London. Even though he was 64, even though most men his age were thinking about retirement, Lawrence worked as hard as ever. "Building our future," he always said. Our house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a modest colonial that Lawrence had purchased 40 years ago when housing prices were reasonable. He'd always been proud of that purchase, of getting in before the boom, but modest was the key word. While our neighbors renovated and expanded, our house remained frozen in 1985. Lawrence said renovations were throwing money away. I pulled into the driveway and practically ran to the front door. I could hear voices inside, which was odd. Lawrence rarely had visitors during work hours. The front door was unlocked, another oddity. Lawrence was meticulous about security. "Lawrence?" I called out, stepping into the foyer. The voices were coming from upstairs. His study was upstairs. Maybe he was on a video call. I climbed the stairs, my hand on the oak banister my mother-in-law had insisted we install 30 years ago. The voices grew clearer. One was definitely Lawrence's, that deep baritone I'd woken up to for nearly 4 decades. But the other voice was higher, younger, feminine, and they were laughing. I reached the landing and froze. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. Not his study, our bedroom. "Lawrence should have retired years ago," the woman's voice said. "Then we wouldn't have to sneak around like this." "Soon, Chelsea. Just 3 more years until I hit 67 and get full Social Security. Then I'll tell her, we'll finally be together properly." My hand went to my mouth. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. 3 more years? Chelsea's voice turned petulant. "You've been saying that for how long now? I'm 41, Lawrence. I want to get married, have the life you promised me." "I know, sweetheart. But if I divorce her now, she'll get half of everything. If I wait until I retire, I can structure things differently, move assets around. She doesn't understand money anyway, never has. She won't know what hit her." I couldn't breathe. I should have turned around, should have left, but I was rooted to the spot. Through the crack in the door, I could see them. Lawrence was sitting on our bed, the bed we'd shared for 38 years, the bed where our children had been conceived. And next to him, running her fingers through his gray hair, was a woman I'd seen before, Chelsea, the woman from his office. The one he'd introduced at the company Christmas party last year as his invaluable assistant. How long had this been going on? How long had I been the fool? "Plus," Lawrence continued, and I could hear the smile in his voice, "Margaret just sold that old house her parents left her. $18 million, the realtor told me. Can you imagine? That changes everything. If I'm patient just a bit longer, that money becomes marital property, and then when I do divorce her, I'll get half. $9 million on top of everything else." The realtor told him? My mind raced. The sale wasn't supposed to close until next week. How did he already know? Chelsea laughed. You're terrible. Does she know yet? About the sale? No. They probably tried to reach her on her cell, but you know Margaret. She never checks her phone. She's probably at the grocery store right now, comparing prices on chicken breasts. They both laughed. Something inside me shattered. Not just my heart, though that was breaking too. Something deeper. A foundation I'd built my entire adult life upon was crumbling. I'd given this man everything. I'd given up my career aspirations to raise our children. I'd given up my own apartment when we married because his was more practical. I'd given up friendships because he said they took too much of my time away from him. I'd given up the idea of graduate school because we couldn't afford it, even though he somehow afforded golf club memberships and business trips to conferences in Maui. I'd made myself small for 38 years, and this was what I got in return? A husband planning to take half of my inheritance while sleeping with a woman young enough to be his daughter? I didn't remember walking down the stairs. I didn't remember getting in my car. But suddenly, I was sitting in the parking lot of a coffee shop 2 miles from home, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had turned white. My phone buzzed. Melissa, my daughter, calling from Seattle. Mom? Did you hear? The sale went through early. They wanted to close before the new year for tax reasons. Congratulations. You're rich. Her voice was so cheerful, so innocent of the devastation I'd just witnessed. Melissa, I heard myself say, though my voice sounded strange, distant. Did your father know about the early closing? Oh, yeah. The realtor called the house line yesterday when you were at book club. Dad answered and said he'd tell you. Did he forget? That man, I swear, he'd forget his own head if it wasn't attached. But he hadn't forgotten. He'd deliberately kept it from me. He'd known for 24 hours and said nothing, all while planning how to take half. Mom? You there? I need to call you back, sweetheart. I sat in that parking lot for an hour, watching people come and go with their lattes and their phones and their normal lives. My mind was remarkably clear. The shock had burned away, leaving something else in its place, something cold and sharp and focused. I pulled out my phone and made a call I never thought I'd make. Patterson and Associates, how may I direct your call? I need to speak with Sarah Patterson, please. Tell her it's Margaret Chen, and it's urgent. Sarah Patterson had been 2 years behind me in college. She'd gone on to become one of the most successful divorce attorneys in the state. We'd reconnected at our reunion 3 years ago, and she'd given me her card. You never know, she'd said with a knowing look that I hadn't understood at the time. I understood it now. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Sarah's office, telling her everything. She listened without interruption, taking notes in a leather-bound notebook. How long do you think the affair has been going on? She asked when I finished. I don't know. He said 3 more years until he'd divorce me, and Chelsea seemed frustrated with waiting. So maybe 6 years? 7? Sarah nodded. We'll need proof. Do you have access to his phone? His computer? No. He keeps everything password protected. Bank statements? Credit card bills? I shook my head miserably. He handles all of that. Everything is paperless, sent to his email. What about the house? Do you have the passwords to the security system? I looked up. We don't have a security system. Sarah smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood. You do now. Margaret, here's what we're going to do. The next week was the best performance of my life. I went home that evening and acted as if nothing had happened. When Lawrence came downstairs for dinner, I served his favorite pot roast and asked about his day. He kissed my cheek and told me about a difficult client, never mentioning Chelsea, never mentioning my inheritance. Oh, by the way, he said casually, cutting into his meat, did the realtor ever reach you about your parents' house? I'd been prepared for this. Sarah and I had rehearsed. My parents' house? No, why? He looked surprised, genuinely surprised. Huh. I thought the sale was supposed to close soon. It is, next Friday, I think. Why, did someone call? No. I just thought I'd heard something. Never mind. He went back to his dinner, and I went back to my performance. That night, while he snored beside me in the bed he'd defiled, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. 3 days earlier, a security company Sarah recommended had installed tiny cameras throughout the house. They looked like smoke detectors, carbon monoxide monitors, electrical outlets. Lawrence, who never noticed anything domestic unless it directly inconvenienced him, hadn't noticed a thing. The cameras caught everything: Lawrence bringing Chelsea to our house on Tuesday afternoon, their conversation about me in the kitchen while drinking my good wine, Chelsea wearing my robe when she came downstairs, Lawrence on the phone with someone, saying, "Once Margaret's inheritance is in the joint account, I'll start the divorce process. The timing has to be perfect." Sarah was building a case that would be airtight, but she needed more. She needed financial evidence. "The affair is damning," she'd told me, "but if we can prove he's been hiding marital assets or committing fraud, we can get you everything." 2 weeks after discovering Lawrence's betrayal, our son Robert came for Sunday dinner. He was 34, a junior partner at a law firm in Boston. He'd always been a daddy's boy, had always admired Lawrence's business acumen and strategic thinking. I wondered what he'd think if he knew his father's strategy involved betraying his mother. "Mom, you seem different," Robert said, helping me clear the table while Lawrence watched football in the den. "Happier somehow." I almost laughed. Happier. I was plotting the destruction of my marriage, documenting my husband's infidelity, and preparing to take everything he'd ever worked for, and my son thought I seemed happy. "I've been doing some thinking about my future," I said carefully, "making some plans." "That's great. You should travel, take up hobbies. You've spent so much of your life taking care of us. It's your time now. Your time now." If only he knew how right he was. The break came 3 weeks later. Sarah called me, her voice vibrating with excitement. "Margaret, we got him. My investigator found bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, 3 of them, totaling just over $2 million. Money that should have been in your joint accounts, money that should have gone toward your retirement, your life together. He's been siphoning it off for 8 years. 8 years? Since right after you retired from the library. I think he saw you as a liability then, not a partner. Started planning his exit strategy." I sat down heavily. 8 years. While I was clipping coupons and buying generic brand cereal because we needed to save, Lawrence was hiding millions in offshore accounts. "There's more," Sarah continued. "Chelsea isn't his only affair. There was another woman, 5 years ago. He paid her $30,000 to keep quiet. The payment came from one of the hidden accounts." I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. "Margaret, with this evidence, we can get you 75% of all marital assets, full claim to your inheritance, and likely get criminal charges filed for tax evasion and fraud. Are you ready to move forward?" Was I ready? I thought about 38 years of making myself smaller, of asking permission to buy a new winter coat, of apologizing when I wanted to spend time with friends, of believing I was the problem every time he criticized or dismissed me. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." We filed the papers on a Thursday. Lawrence was served at his office, in front of Chelsea and 3 colleagues. Sarah's investigator delivered the summons personally, along with a thick folder containing printouts of the security camera footage. He called me 17 times that afternoon. I didn't answer. By the time he came home that evening, I'd already moved into Melissa's old bedroom. I'd changed the locks on the master bedroom door, and the door to his study. "Margaret!" He pounded on the bedroom door. "Margaret! We need to talk about this." "Talk to my lawyer," I called back. Sarah had coached me on this too. Don't engage. Don't negotiate. Don't let him manipulate you. This is insane. Over one mistake? One indiscretion? I opened the door then. His face was red, his tie loosened. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. "One mistake?" My voice was cold. 6 years with Chelsea. Another affair before that. 8 years of hiding money. 38 years of controlling every aspect of my life. Which one mistake are you referring to, Lawrence? His mouth opened and closed. "How did you—" "The cameras. You put cameras in our house? It's my house too. Or did you forget that while you were planning to steal half of my inheritance? That's different. That money should be ours. You're my wife. Not for long." His expression changed then, from anger to something calculating. "You'll never make this stick. I have the best lawyers money can buy. So do I. And I have evidence. All of it. Every offshore account. Every woman. Every lie." I watched the color drain from his face. The next morning, Robert called. His voice was tight with anger. "Mom, what are you doing? Dad called me last night. He's devastated. He made one mistake, and you're destroying him over it? One mistake? Okay, maybe he wasn't perfect, but 38 years of marriage, doesn't that count for something? Don't you think you're overreacting? I closed my eyes. This was the hardest part. Harder than discovering the affair, harder than filing for divorce. My own son, my boy, thought I should accept betrayal because standing up for myself was overreacting. Robert, your father hid $2 million in offshore accounts. He committed tax fraud. He's been planning to divorce me for years while taking half of my inheritance. This isn't about one mistake. This is about a pattern of abuse and control that you've been too blind to see. Abuse? Mom, he never hit you. There are many kinds of abuse, Robert. He hung up on me. That hurt, but not as much as I expected. Sarah had warned me about this too. Family members often side with the abuser, she'd said, especially sons with fathers. It's easier than examining their own complicity in the system. Melissa, on the other hand, flew home immediately. Mom, she said, hugging me tight in the airport arrivals area. I'm so proud of you. I've watched you shrink yourself for my entire life. It's about time you took up some space. The divorce proceedings took 9 months. 9 months of depositions and negotiations and Lawrence's lawyers trying every trick to reduce what he owed me. They claimed the offshore accounts were business investments and that the cameras I'd installed violated his privacy. They argued that my inheritance, even though I'd received it before separating, should be marital property because we were still married when the sale closed. Sarah destroyed every argument. The cameras were legal, installed in my own home. The offshore accounts were hidden marital assets. My inheritance, which I'd immediately placed in a separate account in my name only, was separate property because we'd been living separately at the time the funds were transferred. The judge, a woman in her 50s who reminded me of my college roommate, was not sympathetic to Lawrence's case. Mr. Chen, she said during one hearing, her voice dripping with disdain, you hid marital assets for 8 years, committed adultery for 6, planned to defraud your wife of her inheritance, and paid off a previous mistress to stay quiet. And you expect this court to be lenient? I don't think so. In the end, I got 78% of all marital assets, including the house. Lawrence got his offshore accounts frozen pending an IRS investigation. Chelsea, it turned out, didn't want to stick around once Lawrence had no money and faced potential jail time. She sent me a bizarre apology letter that I immediately threw in the trash. The most satisfying moment came 3 months after the divorce was finalized. I was having lunch with Melissa and Sarah at a restaurant downtown when Lawrence walked in with his lawyer. He looked terrible, older, grayer, defeated. He saw me and froze. I watched him take in the scene. Me, in a new dress I'd bought without asking permission, laughing with my daughter and my friend, clearly not devastated by his absence. I raised my glass to him. Just a slight gesture, nothing dramatic, but he understood. He'd spent 38 years trying to make me believe I was nothing without him. He was wrong. Robert came around eventually. 6 months after the divorce, he called to apologize. I talked to Melissa, he said quietly. She told me things about how Dad treated you, how he controlled everything. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have seen it. I should have protected you. You were a child, I told him. And then you were a young man trying to navigate your relationship with your father. I understand. Do you forgive me? There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart, but I do need you to understand something. I'm not the same woman who raised you. I'm not going to shrink myself anymore. Not for anyone. I wouldn't want you to, he said, and I could hear tears in his voice. I'm proud of you, Mom. I should have said that before. A year after signing the divorce papers, I was sitting in my newly renovated kitchen, sipping coffee and looking at travel brochures for Ireland, when the doorbell rang. It was a courier with a thick envelope. Inside was a check from the IRS. Lawrence had settled his tax fraud case by paying a massive fine. As the ex-spouse who'd been defrauded, I was entitled to a portion of the recovered funds. The check was for $400,000. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. For 38 years, I'd lived on a $300 a week allowance, asking permission to buy new towels. And now I was holding a check for nearly $500,000, money that Lawrence had stolen and tried to hide. I called Sarah immediately. "Congratulations," she said. "So, what are you going to do with it?" I looked around my kitchen, at the new appliances I'd chosen myself, at the walls I'd painted a cheerful yellow despite Lawrence always insisting the house should be neutral tones. I thought about the Ireland trip I'd booked for next month, the creative writing class I'd enrolled in at the community college, the women's shelter I'd been volunteering at every Tuesday. "I'm going to live," I said. "I'm finally going to live. I'm 63 now. I've taken up painting. I'm learning Italian. I'm planning a trip to Greece with Melissa for her 40th birthday. I wake up every morning in a house that's entirely mine, make my own decisions, spend my own money without asking permission or justifying every purchase. Robert visits often, and we have honest conversations about patterns of control and how to build healthier relationships. He's working on it with his own wife, breaking cycles he didn't even know existed. Lawrence? I heard he moved to Florida. He works part-time as a consultant. Chelsea married someone else. I don't think about him much anymore. When I do, I don't feel anger. I feel pity. He spent 67 years on this earth and never learned that you can't control another person into loving you. You can't build a life on lies and expect it to stand. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the divorce, if I miss being married, if I'm lonely. I tell them the truth. I've never been less lonely in my life. For 38 years, I was married to a man who made me feel invisible. Now I wake up every day and see myself clearly for the first time. I see a woman who survived, a woman who stood up, a woman who refused to shrink. I see myself. And that, I've learned, is worth more than any amount of money, any years of marriage, any false promises of security. You deserve better than breadcrumbs and broken promises. You deserve better than making yourself small so someone else can feel big. You deserve respect, honesty, and a life lived on your own terms. It took me 62 years to learn that lesson. But it's never too late. It's never too late to stand up, to speak up, to reclaim your life. Trust me. I know.